One of the best and most terrifying moments in my life was when my parents dropped me off at college. The best because I was my own man. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I went to college in Joplin, Missouri. That's about a 10-hour car ride, right? So my parents really have to think, do I want to surprise my son or not, right? It was first time stepping into freedom. Terrifying because, and I think you'll connect with this if you went to college or were living with anybody else, I kind of already tipped my hand, roommates, right? Roommates can make or break a semester, right? The answer is yes. You guys, it's okay to engage. I lived with the emo kid that wore black all the time. Like, I'm kind of 50% there. I like Johnny Cash, but, you know, he's not my favorite, but I do like him. I roomed with the guy that was super popular, which was great because he was never in his dorm. He was dating somebody new every weekend. I roomed with the guy that is from, like, wherever you're from when you're from Oklahoma, that loved, like, old 80s, 90s gangster hip-hop that would make your grandma's neck hair stand up. And they would only play it between 1 and 3 a.m. I'm like, no kidding, I don't know why I took this class when I did. I'm like, dude, I have Old Testament history at 7 a.m. We're covering the minor prophets. I'm almost like, just keep playing, and I'm not going to go to class anyways, right? And then I had a roommate that said, hey, man, can you wake me up so I can get to class on time? I said, hey, man, there's an alarm clock. And he said, well, sometimes I sleep through it. I'm like, hey, I'm not your mom, so I don't, what do you, I have to get up and go to class at 7. I know your first class isn't until 9, but there's a part of adulting that you have to kind of, I've roomed with everybody, every kind of person. And yes, I am not perfect. They've had to room with me. I'm a slob to live with, okay? Ask my wife. I can be, if you're a clean freak and you like things nice and order and colors and numbers, you're going to hate me as a roommate. I actually had one guy, I know I shared this before. He wasn't my roommate. I just love the story. He's a great guy. His mama made him a laminated step-by-step on how to do laundry, and he put it on his wall. I'm like, dude, I know this is freshman orientation. You got about 4 days until the upperclassmen come and make fun of you. You need to memorize that or you could take a photo back then. Take a photo of it and just get rid of it. Community is not something that we naturally gravitate towards, right? It is not a value of Americans. We love autonomy, thinking we have community because we're on social media all the time, right? And so community is something that we desperately want and crave, right? Like a pastor doesn't have, like we know that from medicine and science and psychology, that we need each other, right? But yet we don't drift towards that, do we? One of my favorite books that I read in my 20s, it's a bit out there, but I don't, like everybody I don't read because I agree with. I want to read all perspectives. It's a guy by the name of Donald Miller, and he wrote a book called Blue Like Jazz. And he reflects on his time living with roommates for the very first time. And this is what he says. He says, I didn't know what to think about the idea of living in community at first. I'd lived on my own for about 6 years, which is always tough when you live solo and then you have to live with other people. The idea of moving in with a bunch of slobs didn't appeal to me. Living in community sounded odd, right? Cults do that sort of thing, you know? First you live in community, then you drink punch, and then you die. Yeah, that's extreme. But later on in the chapter, he says, living in community made me realize one of my faults. I was addicted to myself. This is before social media, right? We have this awareness that we agree with Don, right? I could feel it in the room with your response. All I thought about was myself. The only thing I cared about was myself. I had very little concept of love, altruism, or sacrifice. And I love this line. I discovered that my mind is like a radio that picks up only one station, the one that plays me, K-Don, all the time, right? My world, you're living in it. Welcome. And I get that sense too, right? Like that's why it's so hard that we don't naturally drift towards community or living life with other people. Because we're taught to be a self-made man, a woman, pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, be independent. And it's hard for us to be vulnerable in the context of community. I mean, even if you've been in a life group or going to church much of, if not your whole life, there's very few people that know all of us and are still comfortable with us to be in our presence, right? It's not a natural thing for us to drift towards community, but we want it. We hunger and long after it. C.S. Lewis wrote a book called Four Loves, and he talks about the four Greek words for love. And in the section I'm going to read, he's talking about philos love, Philadelphia, brotherly love, and how much we crave friendship. He says friendship is born out of the moment when one man or woman says to another, "What, you too? I thought no one but myself." You ever been there, right? You're at a ball game watching your kids play, at work, or even at church or in a life group, and someone quotes like a random line from The Office or a TV show that you like, and you're like, wow, me too. Like, we crave those moments when there's instant connection, but we find it difficult to step into it on our own. We would rather justify ourselves by saying a mature Christian knows a lot about Scripture but doesn't live life in community. Like, that's really hard. It's easy to read the Bible on your own. It's hard to give of yourself in the practice of community. And this is why our next value in our journey series is called To Journey With. Because we believe at RCC, every journey needs a circle of friends. And man, here's what's annoying about this idea. You actually cannot be a mature Christian if you're never in community. And I'll explain that more later here as we kind of unpack some scriptures that Jesus and Paul taught on. Like 90% of the Christian walk is doing it with other people and being in the context of community. So to say life groups aren't for me, to say like Bible studies or FPU classes or serving on the weekend isn't for me, is to really miss out on like the majority of what it means to live the Christian life. Every journey needs a circle of friends. And one of the greatest gifts God gave us after Jesus, the cross, the resurrection, is the church. He gave us a church. And the church is the soil where cultivation of the gospel takes place, right? And so when people come to RCC for the very first time, you better believe it, man. The second they walk in, there's that sense, right? Like when you were a kid and you had, I don't know if they do this anymore, but like you had sleepovers at someone's house, and you walked into the house and you felt it. Oh, this family does not do family the way mine does. There's just you know what I mean? Or it was like, wow, this family's great. I want to live here all the time, right? And maybe your parents are like, bye, thanks, Karen, right? Like, see you later. There's a sense that people feel of how we do family when we walk into church and when we walk into each other's lobbies or living rooms, right? And one of the greatest gifts that God gave us, the Father, after his Son and Spirit, is the local church. Now, Paul and Jesus teach on this. It's called living, if you like Greek, the alelone life. How do I remember alelone? Eric Clapton, Layla? There you go. Now you're never going to get that song on your head the rest of the day. It's living the one another life, right? So the proxy, or the theology of how we think about God informs how we live, the proxy, right? And so for Paul and Jesus, how they look at the Trinity, which is the perfect context of a relationship, right? Father, Son, and Spirit, in complete agreement, complete alignment, complete community, complete love and trust, informs how they live out their faith. Does that make sense? And so to say I believe in the Father, Son, and Spirit, and to never live in the context of community would be, you might believe it, but you're not living it. You don't understand it. In fact, the one another phrase or word is used over 100 times in 94 New Testament verses. 47 of the 100 are used by Jesus to instruct his followers. So about half of the one another texts are from the lips of the God that we believe is God, that died for our sins, that rose again 3 days later. Like, it's not important, it's imperative that we journey with other people, that we make ourselves available to other people. And I know it's difficult. Even Paul wrote 60% of the one another commands. Like, can you imagine if you took out, like if Paul was writing his New Testament books and he had to send it to like an editor, and the editor said, get rid of all the one another passages? Like, we would have little to no idea how to live out the Christian faith. We would have high theology because Peter talks about Jesus all the time. I mean, some of my favorite texts and richest texts about who Jesus is, like during Colossians, Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn among many, right? All things were created by him, for him, and through him. Great, we know that, but how do we live that out? Well, how we live that out are buried in the soil of the one another text, right? This invitation to do life with other people. And I just want to take a moment, a few of them actually, and talk about how Paul and Jesus really lay down the ethics of the church, how the church is supposed to live out their faith through what Paul and Jesus talk about in the New Testament, this alelon or one another life, right? And so the first set of texts talk about the one another life is for unity of the church, right? Joining a life group, serving on the weekends, going to a Bible study, FPU class, whatever we offer throughout the years here, isn't just something to do. It's not just a what, it's also a why. The why behind all of these things is the value that we're called to journey with other people, as Jesus did life with his disciples. And we'll talk a lot more about that in our next series coming up in a couple of weeks. We do life with other people to protect the unity of our church. Does that make sense? Right? Like, I love Paul Simon, but we're not rocks and we're not islands. And we do feel pain, right? You didn't know I was going to throw that out there, right? You're welcome. It's a great song. He's a phenomenal, one of my favorite musicians. But he's just wrong. We're wired to be in the context of community. And if we have a bunch of church tremungans that have their opinions, but nobody's rowing together in the same boat to go a same direction, the boat will capsize, right? Like when we're busy protecting unity, we don't have a lot of time to like create division. And so Paul and Jesus are like, this is why the one another life is so mission critical for your church, because it unifies it. Notice how Paul and Jesus talk. Be at peace with one another. Don't grumble among one another. I know sometimes we call those prayer requests, but Paul and Jesus say, don't grumble with one another, right? Don't text someone else in your life group on Tuesday night. Wow, Karen talks a lot about, whatever it is. I don't have anything against Karens. It's just a thing now that people say. Don't challenge or envy one another. Bear with one another. Parents, you say this all the time to your kids. It literally means put up with each other, right? Bear with one another and forgive. Like this, church work is a lot like parenting. And forgive one another. Why? Because we're doing this to protect the unity of the church. And if we're not practicing the one another life, unity is up for grabs. And how unity is up for grabs is we turn into politicians and not disciples, right? Here are the three things that I care about, get on my side. Here are the three things that I care about, get on my side. And it diverts the unity. Although we'll sing the songs and put a smile on our faces, it derails us from moving forward together as a church. The one another life gives unity, but it also cultivates love in the life of our church, right? As a pastor, people ask me all the time, how do I know, how do I know that I'm growing in my faith? Well, there's a million ways to figure that out. But one question is this: has your love and affection for Jesus grown in the last year? Fair question, right? Same with unity in the church. Has your love for RCC and the people in RCC, has it grown? Like, do you know anybody at RCC beyond the person that invited you or the one or two people that you talk to and only talk to every Sunday here and that's it? Like, has your affection and love for other people grown? Because if it has, seriously, guys, like if it has, like inviting 300 people to journey with Jesus in 2020, that's a low bar. That's easy. Like you put a people together that have a white hot passion, that love their church and love other people. That's something like that'll come natural to us. So in that, Jesus and Paul say, love one another, serve one another, be devoted to one another. Now let's talk about these imperative statements here. To Jesus and Paul, this community it's not an option, it's an expectation. So think about this. If I'm loving my church and where I want to go, right? Because I have to ask that. But like pastors have to ask that question. Because at a certain point, you can only hide so long. And usually about year 3-ish into a new ministry, a staff person has to ask, do I want to be known? Staff, we have to ask that too. And we better be living the one another life as well as leaders in the church. And so if my love for RCC is growing, the natural, next step is out of that love, I want to serve. I want to serve the church. Man, this is just, it's a reality, but it's a sad fact. I can, in the 15 years that I've been in ministry, and that's not including like growing up in a great church and interning in other great churches, there's always a connection between lack of serving and lack of affection for their church that they attend. Now, it could go two ways. It could be, I don't really want to serve, or I don't want to get in a life group because I don't feel like people love me here. And that could be true, but it also could be like, I don't know anybody. I haven't given love. I haven't made myself available to be known by other people yet. Like Paul and Jesus are kind of making this claim here that if you have a growing love for your church and the people in it, the natural next step is you want to serve. You want to serve because of all the people that served you and your families over the years, the first time you came. It's a natural response as our affections grow out of love for not only Jesus, but the church that he gave us to work out the gospel while we're living here on earth in real time. And then he says this, be devoted to one another. Oh man, he's going to the jugular with us, right? What does be devoted mean? It's an invitation to ask, do people make it on your calendar? Are you meeting with people? Right? Do you look at prayer requests at RCC and go, that's really unfortunate that person just received a cancer diagnosis. That's really unfortunate that their son is suicidal and is in a mental health hospital. That's really unfortunate that that couple looks like they're heading through divorce. Like, do you just look at that and say, man, that's really unfortunate? Or, you know what, I know that person. I feel comfortable enough reaching out to them. Why don't I call them, text them, email them, Facebook them? I mean, there's so many ways. TikTok them, is that a thing? Is that a verb now? Like, why can't I reach out to them? If our love is growing for our church and the people in it, so too will our desire to serve and to put them in the calendar. This planner I use, it's by Michael Hyatt. It's called the Full Focus Planner. And every week, at the end of every week going to the next week, it asks, who are you making time for? Or who are the relationships you need to connect with? That's convicting, even for me, because it's a planner to get stuff done, right? But church isn't about programs and sermons and music. It's about us. It's about people. It's about our lives and raising our kids and living in the communities that we live in and the church that we go to. And it's just a subtle reminder, hey, Ben, are you practicing what you're preaching? Are you walking the walk? Or are you just talking a big game, right? The one another life is a fight for unity, also to grow our love and affection for our church. And then thirdly, it impacts, this is kind of interesting, the stress and attitude of a church through a big theological concept called humility, right? Which is kind of the ethos and the ethic of Jesus, right? Mainly the cross. That when a whole church practices the one another life or the alone life, there's a sense that it actually affects our bodies where we're able to calm down, right? There's a sense of lower stress. There's a general attitude that when people come into our building, that people are vibrant. They're excited to be here, right? And I'm not saying, like, wow, this isn't like other churches I've been to. Maybe the way that you thought of, wow, this isn't like the way our family does family. I kind of like it here, right? Do you see what I'm saying? When there's a mutual best shot, and we're human, right? We're both light and darkness. We're both sinner and saint. None of us have 100% pure motives all the time, not even myself, to be honest and candid with you. But when we're given our best shot at unity, right? At unity, it kind of lowers the bar on angst, or it brings the emotion of angst and anger and people politicianing, is that the right word, for their own agenda. It gets everyone on the same page. And so when people walk into, I spoke with somebody that came for the first time after the first service. She's like, I just walked in and I felt like I was at home. Everybody spoke to me. They helped me, you know. And in one sense, I want to cry because I'm connecting with this human. And in the other sense, I'm like, we're killing it. You guys are doing awesome, right? You're helping people get connected, pointing them to the hub, like all of those things, right? And there's just this sense that when I walk in, there isn't this like guilt thing going that I've experienced in other churches. That I'm free to journey with Jesus, and I can have my doubts, my hurts, my habits, my hang-ups. And I know that over time I can give those away, like give those up, and Jesus will help me with them. But it's not like I feel like I have to do that right now, that I can settle in here, which is an incredible compliment that someone would say that of our church, right? And Jesus and Paul say it like this: wash one another's feet, honor one another, serve one another, and treat others more important than yourselves. Now, I want to talk about, in the time that we have left, what that looks like practically for us as a church. And we're not just doing this because we have to have a Connect card, but our Connect card highlights or promotes our discipleship pathway. And so here's my challenge to you. I'm about to discuss and talk about some of the ways that you can journey with here at RCC. And I want you to just keep that Connect card close to you. And if you sense what I'm talking about, like I want to step into that, would you mind just communicate that on the card and dropping it off at the hub on your way out? We'd love to follow up with you. Now, some of the ways that we invite people to journey with others here in a circle of friends is through life groups, right? Life groups unify our church, grow our affections and love for our church because you're doing life with other people. And they also help lower the stress and fear of our church through humility, right? This is why I'm not too overbearing about life groups, aside from asking the church, like right now, like life groups to go through the same sermon series only twice a year. Outside of that, groups are free to do kind of whatever they want that would feed and nourish the souls of their groups and what they're struggling with, right? But groups are a great way to grow your affection for other people here at RCC and to practice unity and to practice serving one another. I want to share a video with you from my friends Chris and Rachel York. Chris and Rachel looked at me when I first started and they're like, man, that guy needs some love. My wife was back home. We haven't sold our house yet in Illinois, and much of my beginnings here at RCC was getting connected with them. And my wife and I, Crystal, started a group. They were in it. They're still in that group, and now they're leading that group. And I just want you to hear a portion of their story.
I'm Rachel York.
And I'm Chris York.
We've been coming for about 4.5 years, and we pretty much jumped into a life group right away. We came because of the kids' youth ministry, and we started coming over the summer, and when fall rolled around and the middle started up, we started attending the group that was held during the middle, just because both kids were coming and it made sense, and we are so glad we did.
So I think being a part of a life group, when we first started, I was a little apprehensive. I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know if I was really going to get anything out of it. And what I've really taken away from it is the incredible relationships and support system that our life groups have been. Has really been such an important part of our lives. With the life groups that we've been in the past and now with this new life group, the relationships that we're forming, it's been very rewarding.
I think for us it was a natural extension because we do like to host so much. And for me personally, I felt like it was a good way to challenge myself spiritually and take the next step on my faith journey.
And I think for anybody who's thinking about hosting or questioning about what it's all about, I'd encourage you to just do it. It's really been, it's not something where you've got to know all the answers. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable. You just have to facilitate the conversation. Everyone's been great about having fantastic materials to help you lead, and it really just takes a little bit of your time.
Yeah. Man, what a great story, right? From coming here for the first time, being in a group that has the same life cycle that their friends are in, now leading one. Life groups is a way to journey with other people here at RCC. Another way that we want to give you guys as an opportunity to journey with other people at RCC is through what we're going to call, this is the year of development, what we're going to call family milestones. Now, you'll notice when you check in your kiddos at the check-in, we've got this beautiful wall of content that you may be asking, what is that? Let me tell you. These are contents for family milestones called It's Just a Phase. And what it just, well, that sounded weird. What the content gives you, like words, right, is parenting devotionals, ideas to engage your students, questions to ask your students from when you bring them home from the hospital to graduation. All right, and all of these resources are available for purchase at the Hub. And so regardless of where your student is at from 0 to 18, there's content for you to take home so that you can come alongside of your student and child. We don't want to be a church where we replace mom and dad. We want to be a church, and we will be a church that empowers mom and dad. The other thing that we're doing in 2020 is sort of a beta testing is we're going to be getting a group of people. Now, if this interests you, communicate this on your card, and you guys got it, turn it in at the Hub. If this interests you, we'd love for you to sign up for this. We are, this year, Andrew and Jenny are working together to put a team together, a family milestone team together. And so what we'll be doing at the beginning of 2021 and indefinitely is providing opportunities, milestone moments in the development of your child. For events to come here at RCC. Now, some of those are one-day deals, like parent-child dedication, senior banquets that we already do, and then there's a lot of life in between those moments, right? And so we're working towards developing a program that will have something for pre-K, elementary, middle school, high school, just those critical moments in the life of the child. And the way we're going to set this up, I don't want to give too much of it away because Andrew and Jenny are working on this, but the way we're setting it up is, mom and dad, we're going to put you in the driver's seat of your child's spiritual formation so that every milestone moment, whether it's for pre-K or middle school, like becoming a man, becoming a woman, we want to put mom and dad at the forefront because we believe that you are the greatest influence in your child's life. More happens at home in a year than what happens at the church. Like you could even say, and you would be right, that what happens at home is more important than what happens at church. Because at home is where your child's faith is really worked out. And so we're really excited to unveil this. We're going to be doing a teaching series in September called It's Just a Phase and really working out all of the details. So if this is something that might be of interest to you to be on that team, would love for you to sign up for it. And I've seen it work. I've seen it take place in several churches that I've worked at. And it's great because at the end of the journey, you've got parents crying at graduation. You've got the students' life group leaders crying at graduation because it's expanding, parents, your circle of influence so that other healthy adults can pour into your students that would be saying the same thing as you would be saying, right? Hopefully, mainly helping them to follow Jesus. Another way we're going to offer opportunities for you to journey with other people are through large and mid-sized gatherings. Our small gatherings are life groups, right? About 10 to 12 people. Our medium to large size gatherings are things like Financial Peace University, Bible classes that we'll probably be offering in the future, marriage seminars, different things like that. The reason why we want to do multiple things is because we want to be a church that doesn't settle for a what when we have a greater why. Our why at RCC for community is to help us journey with other people. Well, how do we do that, Ben? Oh, here are 5 ways. Life groups, Financial Peace University, study on Colossians, marriage enrichment seminars. We're not telling you which one to pick. We're telling you we want you to value, journey with, and you decide. You choose for yourself. For some of us, life groups are just hard. We travel a lot for work. Committing to something weekly in the evening can be really tough. But maybe there's something on a Saturday morning or a one-time commitment for a 4-week study on, Love and Respect marriage series. There are so many different ways to journey with other people here at RCC. What we don't want to lose and what we want to highlight is the value. Hey, at RCC, we journey towards Jesus with friends. How do you do that? Here's 5 options. You pick, right? It's an invitation. Faith is an invitation that you can accept or you can reject. Another way we're inviting people to journey with Jesus is on the weekends, like right now, by joining a weekend serving team. And you think about this, right? As Paul and Jesus fight for the unity of the church, as our affections are growing for our church and loving other people, if maybe over time you're getting like you love when first-time visitors come, you love, hey, I see someone with a visitor's gift bag, that's a red light to go talk to them, and a green light. Wow, I need a nap. That's a green light to go speak to them. Like, don't overwhelm them, right? But say, hey, I'm so-and-so. Is this your first time here? Or how long have you been coming here? And we're so glad that you're. Does this make sense, right? And so one way to journey with other people is by joining a serving team. Now, here's the tension in that. Throughout my years in ministry, if you ask staff, what's the one thing you need? Like, if I was a genie and I could grant you one thing, what's the one thing you need? 9.9 times out of 10, more volunteers. We need more bodies. To make your job easier, right? Oh, right? I ask you annoying, tough questions, and I ask staff annoying and tough questions. Here's the deal. People think in business and church and in life, if my resources are limited, so are my dreams. That's not true. That's not true. We don't want people to serve on the weekends because they feel guilty or some sort of religious obligation. We want people joining our teams only if you're buying into the mission of our church, that you get excited when first-time visitors come. When you get excited, like, I'm going to pour a cup of coffee, right? I know I have a weird brain, but someone's going to come for the first time. That coffee is going to hit the lips of a first-time visitor who may have just had a screaming match with their child. Because they're here. Like, they cannot wait for graduation, right? I'm going to open the door for someone for the first time who is struggling with alcoholism and is giving a church their first shot, maybe ever in their life. I'm going to serve in kids ministry because when a 5-year-old jumps up and down and screams their love for Jesus, that is getting incredibly close, if not at the heart of God. Right? I don't serve to fill up a spot. No, I'm more than that. I serve because I love my church and I want to reach out and serve people that loved and served me when I came for the very first time. And I am sold out convinced that every person who comes to RCC can start their journey with Jesus. On any given Sunday, every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday at RCC. Like, I don't just say that to get you excited. I believe that. And so far, 3 Sundays out of every month, somebody is new here at RCC. And it's an opportunity to connect with them. I want to share with you one last story of my friend Jeremy. Check out his journey to journey with and serving on the weekends.
My name's Jeremy Davis. I've been coming to RCC since October of 2018, so for about 18 months at this point. I decided to join the Hub team, which is now the Hub, about 6 months into my journey here at RCC. I decided to do so because the Bible tells us numerous times to serve. It also tells us, that seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then all these things shall be granted unto you. For me, in my younger years, it was not easy to kind of be obedient. And the goal for me wasn't to be, just obedient to be good, but just like I grew up and learned to be obedient to my parents because I love them, I also wanted to be obedient to God because I love him. And this was one of the simple ways I could just dive right in. The experiences I've had doing so and the relationships I've built have really been paramount in my journey in this church, with God currently, with my growth. And I've just met so many tremendous people to serve alongside, to get to know better, and to allow them to know me better. If you're thinking about joining a serve team, I would highly recommend it. It's afforded me just so much more than I feel I've been able to give back, and for me, that's really just huge in experiencing the fellowship in this church.
Yeah, I love Jeremy. He's the real deal. If you get to know him, it's definitely worth your time. He's a great guy. I want to just simply close by reading two texts out of 2 Corinthians that kind of, I think, summarize what I'm talking about and kind of is the ultimate why here for the one another life. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, Paul says, "If anyone is in Christ, he's a new creature. The old things have passed. Behold, the new things have come." And then in chapter 3, verse 18, he says, "But we all, church, with unveiled faces, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit." What's the point of the Christian? Like, what is this all about, right? It's about transformation. It's about metamorphosis, right? It's what happens from when we start our journey here to what happens to us over time. And my hope and my prayer for our church over the next couple of years is that we'd be excited about life transformation because of what Christ has done for us, that he can do for someone that you may never know, right? When you give, you're giving to serve other people that you may never meet in your life. When you serve people at first that you may never know. Why? Because this is for spiritual transformation. Another simple way to remember this is Christ-likeness. It's not knowing head knowledge, facts about Jesus, but knowing the way of Jesus, how he moves and grooves, what he loves, what he gets frustrated over, how he lives his life is an invitation for us to live that kind of life. I pray for our church too, that we could step into this one another life. And again, I just, one final drop. Fill out your Connect card. Take that next step into the journey with. Whether that's a life group, a weekend serving team, family milestones, gatherings, ladies' game night, whatever it is. Don't leave here without thinking about, man, what is my next step into community? Let's pray. Jesus, thanks so much for this gift of community, even though it's really difficult for us as Americans to want autonomy and to settle for pseudo-community like social media and text messages and just not like doing face-to-face life together. And I just pray for my friends because this is it's a big ask that I'm making, Jesus, that you're making of us, your church, right? To do life with one another, shoulder to shoulder life with one another. So that as we do that, your word tells us we begin to transform. And we begin to not just know facts about you, Jesus, but we live the way that you live. And one of those ways is that you give of yourself so that we could find community. And we thank you for that, Lord. And we just continually ask to push us, to lead us, and to guide us into taking next steps, not just into community, but fighting for the unity of our church as we move forward. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.